Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening and welcome to the Earl Morgan Hour. I'm the co-host, Tina Bland, here with the legend, Earl Morgan himself. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight, and I'd like to ask you to please call in 714-888-7444. Visit us on www.GoPro Radio. Click on the button to donate. I'm sure you will appreciate the cause. How are you tonight?
Oh, I'm fine, Tina. Don't let me stop you. Go on and talk about how we can be picked up on Facebook at the Earl Morgan Hour,
On
Twitter
Twitter.
at Earl Morgan Hour, and again the telephone number here for all of you GoPro listeners out there who wish to call in and voice your opinion, whether you like what we're saying or not, at 714-888-7444. And as Tina said, we'll take all donations. Now, we're first going to start tonight. It's your turn to do a book review.
It is.
And so what have you got for us tonight in our book notes?
I have an interesting book. I have an interesting book by a wonderful author that I had the pleasure of meeting. The name of the book is Night. Night by Eli Wiesel. I want to tell you a little about this book. Now, I heard you pronounce it by a different...
The name? The author's been known all my life as Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel. And he's a Pulitzer. I think he's a Nobel Prize winner.
He is.
And he writes a lot about the problems Jews have had with their sojourn in the world, really. But I've always heard his name is Elie Wiesel, but you're calling him Eli Wiesel.
So this is the way he wants us to refer to him now.
Okay, fine, okay.
So in this particular book, I want us to take this journey with me, and I'm going to sew it together. Why this book was so poignant for tonight. This book is about him and his experience. Born in Sedan, Transylvania, and his growing up in this town. And the reason why it's called The Night is because these are the memories of the death of his family and the death of his innocence, and the despair that was faced by the Jews during this time as they took this journey into the night, journey into total despair. And it mentions the slums. And I'm wondering how many of us realize the slums where the origin comes from. Because
the term ghetto?
The term ghetto, that it is, many people of color thinks that the ghettos is something that refers to African Americans, when it absolutely does not.
Actually, you're right. It really did originate with the Jews, not only in Europe when they were just before the First World War, and in the very famous Warsaw Ghetto, which in Poland, but the Jews were ghettoized back in the 16th century when they ran the banking industry in Florence, Italy. They put them. They let them be the bankers. But at night, all the Jews had to go into this place, and they locked them in. And that went on until the Medicis decided that they could do the banking and took it away from the Jews. But yeah, it is not an African American phrase. And as a matter of fact, I don't even like the way we apply it in the African.
Because we don't understand the definition, and that is it exactly. That ghettoized. That is what happened to this particular culture at this particular time, which is why reading is so important.
Yes.
Well, he goes on to talk about how his life was changed from a peaceful home with his parents and his siblings. The poignancy of this book for me was the fact that, once again, this phenomenal writer and how he describes the feel of fear, and how he talks about the beating of the people, the desire to kill so many people, the reason for it. But in this particular book, this man escapes. And now we're not talking about him, we're talking about another character in the book. He escapes and he's beaten, and he is brought back the first time when he escapes. And this time,
Where is this that he escaped from? Transylvania?
yes,
Okay.
during the time that the Nazis were there. And so when he escapes, and I'm going to really be dedicated here because the book was a joy to read. And how many times you get a book that you just devour? So he escapes the first time, and the Nazis catch him, and they decide to use him as a repairman. And what he's repairing is the jewelry, the radios, the watches that they have taken from the people before they exterminate them. So he feels happy to be alive, but so horrible that he's repairing the items from friends and family to stay alive. Now he escapes again, and this time, instead of running for his life and just leaving any place, he decides to go back and to warn this group of people that it has gotten this bad and that they are coming to kill them. And the question,
Where are these people at that he was going to warn?
they were 2 days from being taken onto the train to Auschwitz.
To Auschwitz concentration
internment camp, right?
How did he know that they were going to go to Auschwitz?
Because this is where it is a day ride before they get there that the second character in the book is beaten and taken after he escapes the first time, and he hears the prison guards tell him, "We're going to round them up in 24 hours," and that's their stop. So he runs back instead of escaping. Don't forget, he's escaped one time. He gets another chance at it. And instead of running away forever, this man goes back and he warns his people. And his people say, and I quote, you ready for this, right?
Yes.
God will not let this happen. Okay. We go to the train that they are on, and this is the mark of a phenomenal writer. It is so clear in the words. I mean, they are tangible. This woman describes how she can smell the flesh being burnt, and she is warning people on the train, "I smell flesh being burned." And they say, calm her down, because we don't want her to excite the people on the train.
Yeah, because then you have a mass panic, and that's hard to control.
Really? What are you controlling it from?
Well, you're controlling them. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's either you die in the camps, or they set up a machine gun.
Right.
Just mow you down.
So you're controlling what?
Yeah.
So this horror story, I want to bring it to the full circle. The wonderful poignant point of this is what African Americans must do. Over and over again, we need to tell our story. We need to give our stories life. And I want to give you an example. Last year, I took my son to our 100th year reunion of my family. And what we do is we have journals and we have letters that we hand down from generation to generation, keeping our stories alive. Too many times in our communities, with our histories and the histories of our community as well as our individual families, we do not do this. But when we do this, I think, like the poem Maya Angelou has, this is how we rise. This is why and still we rise. Because look what happened to these people. The very few that escaped, with dignity they tell their story, making sure that it does not happen again. I think it's like what we say about history. If you don't know it, you are doomed to repeat it.
That's been proven very, quite often in the last 20 years.
And this is why we read. And this is why we tell our story. And this is why our stories are so important. And this is also why you can learn from people and cultures.
Well, Ellie Wiesel. I've watched him and listened to him for years, and I've had some familiarity with Jewish kids over the years when I was in grammar school, which was a predominant, heavily Jewish public school, and that's when I first heard of Hebrew school, which is where all Jewish kids go, boys in those days. Now boys and girls. Boys have a bar mitzvah, girls have a bat mitzvah, and they go and they learn their stories and they learn their language, and the result, people say, well, so why do they do that? And the issue to me is clear. The people, the Hebrew race has escaped almost total annihilation. They've been enslaved on more than one occasion, ghettoized at least 3 or 4 times, killed by the millions, thousands, for nothing. And still, as you say, they rise. And that is their history has served them well, so that they can continue to rise.
As history will, if you know it. When I went to Israel, one of the greatest things I remember is when I went to the Wailing Wall, and also when I saw the small strip of land that is being fought over. The thing to me that stands out was not the girlfriend that lived up here and then moved to Kentucky, who happens to be Jewish and I've known for 25 years, but the fact that this book should be a book about every culture. Every culture should have a book like this, that where we tell our stories, where our families repeat the stories, where periodically you learn your stories. This is how we gain strength. This is what we seem to be sorely lacking.
Well, we do have a problem, and recently you begin to see people begin to attack that in the black community, especially. 12 Years a Slave is a good example of this, of what the story was, a part of it. And then you have Skip Gates and the others who are delving into our past and our genealogy to show how we got here and how we are of a lot of other cultures. Because I always tell people about that. They're talking about, no blacks and whites allowed. And I said, look, there's been race mixing going on. You and I sitting here in this studio now, when you look at our complexions, can tell you there's some race mixing going on there somewhere. Something's been going down. Behind the shed during slavery. So, but we're not telling those stories. And you're right. Our kids have no idea the history. They don't even understand the history of where they are right now, let alone where they came from. We don't tell those stories.
But this is such a simple fix. I remember when I went to the first reunion, and I was told about the woman that came over on a slave ship that had 2 daughters that married her owner's sons. The owner was an attorney, and his sons became attorneys. I mean, everyone should know this. How did you get here?
How did you get here, and why did you get here?
And then what is expected of you? What is expected of you?
Right.
That's the "and still I rise." And if you don't know, then of course you're going to wallow around and feel sorry for yourself as if somebody owes you something. I think we owe you your history.
Well, I'm going to again reintroduce the show. This is the Earl Morgan Hour with your host Earl Morgan. You can hear us on Facebook. You can follow us on Facebook at the Earl Morgan Hour and on Twitter at Earl Morgan Hour. And if you wish to call in, please do. We're hoping that we'll get some calls tonight at 714-888-7444. You're listening to Naima by John Coltrane, the incomparable John Coltrane. And we are talking about a book that my co-host has brought with her. Yes, please hold it up. Called Night, and it's written by Eli Weiss. How does he want it pronounced? Eli Whistle?
Right, that's it.
And the reason I'm having a problem with that,
Weasley.
The reason I'm having a problem with that is for the last 50 years I've called him Ellie Wiesel. It's everybody's. That's what I've always heard. And so now you learn something new every day. So we're down to now calling him Eli Whistle. And we're talking about the fact that the Jewish experience is one that we might be able to replicate for ourselves because we need to be able to tell our story. And our children, African American children, are so lost. I think that's why the N word was so easily reclaimed by them. All right, we have to go to a break, and we will be back very shortly. Stay tuned, please. Don't go nowhere.
And call in.
And call in at 714-888-7444.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a great opportunity. If you have a product or a service, a talent or something important to say, now's your chance to have your very own radio show. Whether you're just starting out, a veteran looking for a professional platform to enhance your presentation, the GoPro Radio Network is the premier place to cultivate and share new and exciting content. We'll help you to grow your audience and keep it growing long after your first broadcast. Now you have a voice. Call 212-696-8562 today or visit www.goproradio.com and you'll be amazed at how easy and affordable it is to have your very own show on the fastest growing network in the galaxy. GoPro Radio Network. Listen to the voices in your head.
You're listening to content developed by the GoPro Radio Network, the fastest growing network in the galaxy. GoPro Radio Network. Listen to the voices in your head.
We're back.
Good evening again.
Yes, good evening, Tina, my co-host here at the Earl Morgan Hour. And you can follow us on Facebook at the Earl Morgan Hour and
Twitter at Earl Morgan Hour.
And you can call us in at
714-888-7444.
And the soulful music you're listening to in the background is Naima by the one and only John Coltrane. This I can listen to this all day. It's just that's sweet and soothing. Well, it's time for us to get on to the next segment of our program, which is our right jab.
Yes.
So I'm gonna deliver the right jab tonight. And my right jab tonight is well, we usually in this segment we take a little poke at the right. And the strangest thing happens here. You know, we had the Affordable Care Act. They tried 50 times to repeal this piece of legislation with no luck. They said it was never going to work, that Barack Obama was and the administration of Barack Obama were never going to meet their quota of 6 million people signing up by March 30th. Well, what happened was they did meet their quota, and surpassed it by about 100,000 people who enrolled for the Affordable Care Act. But what the right, you think the right would say, well, all right, maybe we didn't get this right, maybe we have to. No, they're still out there denying this thing. And they're saying things like, well, I don't believe the numbers.
I think you would say people need health care. And since their health care is covered, maybe we can look out for someone else.
Well, you know, what they're saying instead is, well, it's not true. It reminds me of what the right once said about one of their think tanks said about the voter fraud. Now, by all measures, there's almost an infinitesimal amount of voter fraud. But the right came up with this idea that there is, and one of their think tanks said that voter fraud is widespread but undetectable. Now, I mean, that is the oxymoron of the year.
Okay.
And you know, so they're just going to say it's not working, it's not going to work. They're making all the same arguments they did before, and we're going to repeal it. And I'm thinking, and you're going to take the health care away from 6 million people.
Well, how different is this from what who what was his name again? Mitt Romney. How different was it from his? How different is it? Not much at all.
You mean his health plan?
His health plan.
When he was the governor of
that was
Massachusetts.
successful.
It is exactly the same plan. He even admits to that. But the other thing that I want to take a little poke at the right about is that they're still opposed to equal pay for equal work. And the question I have is, these right-wing guys all have wives and mothers, who many of whom work. How can they tell their mothers and wives and girlfriends or whatever, fiancés, well, you shouldn't make as much? And I've heard an argument made by some people on the right about choices. Well, women have a lot of choices they can make, and that, look, nobody chooses to make less money for work. I mean, what are they? You listen to that kind of rationale, and you say, what in the world? And no one challenges that. You say, well, wait a minute, what do you mean they have a choice? You mean if they can say, well, yeah, we know we can make more money, but we'd really rather make less?
Well, I have to tell you this. Less money for equal work, that was the statement, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think it should be more money for more work, because when was the last time a mother had a vacation from being a mother?
Never. They don't get
okay.
vacation.
When was the last time you got a sick day and you didn't have to be a mother? Okay. So we're doing more work. We are not doing less. We are working at home and then going to work and then returning home to continue our work.
That's right. I mean, we put a lot on women. And, I'm not one of these guys who has a problem with women. I think they're great. And I think that probably we would be better off if more women were in charge of things than they are now. I think that you wouldn't have these problems of testosterone, and egos pushing and shoving each other around. I think the women would find a way to work with each other a lot, in a much more amenable fashion than males. But they're still on the warpath against this, and that's the right, that is. And I'm trying to figure out, how can you be against equal pay for equal work? That doesn't make sense. And I heard one guy say, he said, well, would you want, because part of the new Equal Pay Act is that people will now be able to find out how much money they're making and their co-workers are making. And I heard this one black Republican, oddly enough, say, well, what about privacy? Do you want people to know what you're making? Well, look, I worked for a union. I worked as a union member, as a newspaper man and a member of the newspaper guild for 32 years. And everybody knew what we made because, everybody at a certain level in the union made so much. And we all got a raise and we knew what we were making, more or less within a certain parameter. So, no, I don't mind people knowing what I'm making. What's the big deal? Especially if it means that I'll be able to find out where I stand in the scheme of things in terms of my salary.
I read a very interesting book maybe 10 years ago. And I think two things. When I worked on Wall Street for 15 years, I remember when a coworker found out how much I worked, and these were guys, they said, my God, you make more than I do. Of course I did. I negotiated a better salary, number one. But number two, in the sector that I work in now, you're right. People know how much you work and how much you make, because the salaries are now governed from start to finish. Taking this into consideration, I think that we need to go back to that table where we sit and we talk to each other and say, you know what, do you want a partner? Do you want someone to work with you? Or do we alienate each other and do we become combatants? Comrade or combatant? Which one?
Well, I think that's where I bring that issue of women in the workplace up, because in my experience, when you put women in a place to deal with things, they become comrades. When you put 2 men or 3 men in a room, they become combatants, because their egos get involved and their status in the world gets involved, and they don't they're trying to figure out how to beat the other guy out, when it would really be in both their interests if they both succeeded. They only are looking out for number one. I think it's something in the way that the human race just grew out of its infancy, that men had to go out and do that and fight and do the wars and all that. I think there'd probably be less wars if women were involved. I don't think we would have went into Iraq if there had been some level-headed women around to say, well, wait a minute now, before we go barging in there, what are we doing?
Well, you know, it's a different story when the child you carry for 9 months, you're getting ready to send possibly to their death or to be brought home differently. It's a different world. It is. And we're going to talk and we're going to use violence as a last approach. But until I think the sexes realize we have more in common.
Yes. Well, you know, the other thing that always makes me laugh, though, they talk about women in the workplace because there's so many more. You know, having come up as an African American back in the 40s and the 50s, almost all the women were in the workplace. Black women were in the workplace. You know, we couldn't pay the rent and eat.
Well, don't forget, we didn't have that problem with burning our bras, so we could go there.
Yeah, yeah.
We were always partners.
Yeah, I mean, you know, usually and very often in the black community in those years, it was the women that were working and not the men. Often, there were more jobs, but very often black men were out of work for long stretches of time, couldn't get a job. And women had to almost carry the burden in the house for a while.
But if you remember, it wasn't even seen as carrying the burden by the woman, because the men and women of color that I knew, it was a partnership. This is how we are going to make it. This is how we care for the family.
Yeah. Now, I remember in my own case, there were times when my mother worked and there were times when she didn't. But as the family got larger, and it got larger, boy. You know, at first for many, many years, till I was about 4 years old, I was the only child asking for a brother or sister. And then I got a brother, I had a sister, and a brother, and a sister, and a sister, and a brother.
Be careful what you ask.
Yeah, you know, you might actually get it. But my mother worked for the most part of her life. She worked, and my wife worked for the most part. Well, she worked. We always worked as a couple to get what we needed to get. Because
partnership.
And now the whole nation is in the condition that black people were in the 40s and 50s when you had two wage earners. Now it's almost impossible to survive without the two wage earners. So. And
now it's almost impossible to, even though it's almost impossible to survive without being a two paycheck home. If one loses a job, it's almost impossible to find a job again.
Oh, yes.
It's no longer the time when you walk off a job and on to another.
Yeah, I mean, there have been times, and my father told me times during the Second World War, you could quit a job and walk down the street and get another one. Those days are far gone. Now people with advanced degrees are struggling to find work. So we have to start thinking about ourselves in a holistic fashion.
That's right.
Other than some kind of you're not going to work and I'm going to work.
Job creators and right. Partnerships.
Right. So I just want to say to the right, some of the stuff that you do sounds so fanciful that, you know, you got the figures. You're saying, well, all right, there's 6 million people who have signed up for the Affordable Care Act, or is more popularly called Obamacare. But we don't believe that 6 million. They made those numbers up. And we now know that there are more people insured than have been insured in almost 30 years. But they still continue to say it does. You know, their way of dealing with things is to just say, I deny it.
Well, I will say to those that feel enough is never enough, I am so thankful that we have a president whose mother was sick. And during her dying time, he made sure that he promised her if he became president, this would no longer go on. He would make sure health care came to be. And he's fought his heart out to make sure of that. Kudos to you.
Yeah, well, we're the only industrialized nation in the world where people have to struggle to get health care. This is not true anywhere else. This problem doesn't exist in Europe, doesn't exist in large parts of Asia. It's just here. And you wonder, well, what is it? What the devil is wrong with us? Along with our reasons, along with our denying gun control, which is clearly something we need. You wonder what is in the psyche of the American public aside from the fact that they all hate Barack Obama, some because they don't like his policies, and some, let's face it, because they don't like his color, that allows them to think they can go on and have 50, 60 million people without health care. Sometimes people die because they don't have health care in this country. And that, with all this abundance, with people making outrage, the owner of Prudential made $20 million last year.
Enough is never enough.
Yeah, gimme. That's what should be on their tombstone. All right, we're coming up on a break. We're going to take a short break, and then our guest will be here in the hot seat. Please stay tuned. We have an interesting a half hour coming up that I think will be beneficial to the people who will hear about it in terms of crime and how we can solve it. Thank you very much. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
The views and opinions expressed on GoPro Radio Network shows are solely those of the speakers and are not necessarily the views or opinions of GoPro Radio Networks, Inc. or its affiliates. These broadcasts are provided on the understanding that they do not constitute professional advice or services. Individuals who speak in these broadcasts express their own opinions, experiences, and conclusions. GoPro Radio Networks and its affiliates do not necessarily endorse or oppose any particular opinion or conclusion discussed in these broadcasts. You may not edit, modify, or redistribute these broadcasts in any way without the express permission of GoPro Radio Networks, Inc. GoPro Radio Networks assumes no liability for any of your activities in connection with these broadcasts or for your use of these broadcasts in connection with your website, computer, or playing device.
You want to know the truth, folks? Do you really want to know the truth? Well, perhaps you can't handle the truth. But if you can, you can listen to GoPro Radio. Tune in at www.goproradio.com. Now, have I made myself clear?
GoPro Radio Network. Listen to the voices in your head. I know I do.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a great opportunity. If you have a product or service, a talent, or something important to say, now's your chance to have your own radio show. Whether you're just starting out or a veteran looking for a professional platform to enhance your presentation, the GoPro Radio Network is the premier place to cultivate and share new and exciting content. We'll help you to grow your audience and keep it growing long after your first broadcast. Now you have a voice. Call 212-696-8562 today or visit www.goproradio.com and you'll be amazed at how easy and affordable it is to have your own radio show on the fastest growing network in the galaxy. GoPro Radio. Listen to the voices in your head.
You're listening to content developed by the GoPro Radio Network, the fastest growing network in the galaxy. GoPro Radio Network. Listen to the voices in your head.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tinia Bland. I'm here with Earl Morgan, my co-host. Thank you for listening in. I want you to join us on Facebook at the Earl Morgan Hour, Twitter at Earl Morgan Hour, and to call in, please, at 714-888-7444. Please call in and donate. Philanthropists welcome, and if you have little, please tune in. I want you to please call us. Let us know what you think about the show. Let us know what you think about our guests. On a different hat that I wear, we bring in Mr. Bill Breaker, who is the president of the NAACP's Jersey City Branch 2086. Shantae Moore, Shantae Presley, who works with our children's group, and she is the advisor. This is very important to me and a wonderful hat that I wear as the political action chair. Welcome.
Jersey City NAACP.
Branch 2086.
Welcome, both of my guests. And tonight we're going to talk first with Bill about law enforcement and police protection. Um, you know, it's getting warm out there now, and it's getting warm quickly. By the end of this week, we may be up to 70 degrees. We used to look forward to that time. Remember, Bill?
Yes, sir.
You saw people you hadn't seen in 5 months.
That's right.
Now you see drug dealers you haven't seen in 5 months. The corners fill up with people plying their trade, and all kinds of other mischief gets done. And we need some way to mitigate that. I know that you had your own ideas about that, since you once were yourself a law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
Would you tell us what you feel is the best way to combat the crime, especially in the black community where there is so much crime?
Well, I'm a strong proponent of community-based policing. I believe that's absolutely what is needed in high crime areas of our city where we live, sadly. Community-based policing, its primary objective is crime prevention. And it's a partnership that is formed with the community and calls for organizational transit into a mode of people and police working together. What we really need is a high physical presence of police walking the beat in high crime areas. I am convinced after 32 years, and I was a police officer, a sergeant, a lieutenant, and ultimately deputy police director, so I know of which I speak, and I live in the heart of the African American community. I know what we need, and what we need is community policing. We need a partnership with the police department, and we need a high physical presence of police to keep the corners clear and to make our communities devoid of social disorder.
Well, you know, Bill, you've been talking about this for a long time. As a matter of fact, I participated in a march that you led from Mount Pisgah Church after they had, you remember they had the shooting?
I do.
Where these kids were in a van and some clowns fired a gun off and the bullet shattered the windshield or went through the windshield. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but it became it was a wake-up call.
Yes.
And I remember you saying then that you wanted community policing. Now, we've had a change of administration. That whole incident happened during the administration of former Mayor Jeremiah Healy.
Correct.
We now have a new mayor, Steve Fulop. And I know that you had some this conversation has been ongoing, transit to two administrations. What has happened with that idea of community policing? Have you talked to anybody in the administration about it?
Well, prior to the election, I was at, and prior to my becoming president also, I was chairman of the Public Safety Committee and a member of the executive board of the Jersey City branch of the NAACP. And one night we had a guest, and that guest was Steve Fulop, who at that time was the downtown councilman. He's a member of the NAACP. And I was giving a presentation that evening to the branch pertaining to community policing. And suddenly he stood up and said, Mr. Breaker, I'd like to join your committee. So I said, of course. So I gave my presentation. Then shortly after the meeting, he said, when does your committee meet and when can I come? And he came to our next meeting, but then he announced to me that he was going to be running for mayor and he was not going to have the time to devote to the committee. He said, but he liked the ideas that I was espousing and thought that they were truly in the best interest of the community.
And you're talking about community policing.
Exactly.
Which essentially is a cop on the beat.
Right. Essentially, that's what it is, a cop on a beat. So I was under the impression that he thought that a cop on the beat, or community policing, if you will, is what was needed for our community, and if he became mayor, he would institute it. Okay, granted, he's only been mayor for a short period of time.
Almost a year.
So I'm willing to give him a little time to institute the program, but action speaks louder than words.
Well, I was reading in just yesterday's Jersey Journal about a sweep that the police put into operation I guess that was Sunday night to Monday, and they netted a bunch of guys who had weapons and drugs, and of course they arrested them. And this is what they're going to be touting. But there's a lot of guys out there still with weapons and drugs, and they're out there. I mean, you see guys, dealers on the corners. You see them all the time, and they don't seem to feel like anybody's ever going to interdict their operation or stop them from what they're doing. And they get into fights over territory, and people get shot and killed, and bystanders who have nothing to do with it often end up getting shot and killed. So why can't they? The idea that you have the cop on the beat, the cops on the beat when I was a kid, seemed to work pretty well. How come? Have you talked to anybody in the police department? Or do you think the mayor should do it? How would this sort of a thing ever come into fruition?
Well, the mayor is the chief executive officer of Jersey City. Everybody works for him. And I'm absolutely certain that if the mayor instructed the public safety director to institute community-based policing, it would be done. Now, why he hasn't, I can't say. I don't know what goes on in the man's mind. But just let me say this for a very brief moment.
Sure.
There's a great book out. It's been out about 2 or 3 years, actually. It's called The New Jim Crow, written by a professor from Ohio State University by the name of Michelle Alexander. And it's subtitled Mass Incarceration in the Era of Colorblindness. And what it speaks to is filling up the jails with low-level drug dealers of color and purporting that that is doing something about crime. And the fact of the matter is, it isn't. It makes second-class citizens out of those who have been arrested, cost the taxpayers $50,000 a year to house them.
That's a person.
That's per person. And it doesn't seem to be like a winning strategy. So I don't favor mass incarceration. What I favor is a crime prevention program. And any crime prevention program worth its salt must be predicated upon a strong physical presence of police in high crime areas. Now, we don't need police in Society Hill. We don't need police on the waterfront. We don't need police in Country Village, for goodness sakes. But there are certain areas of our town, such as Greenville and Ward F, where crime is prevalent. And the only way you're going to solve that problem is by a physical presence of police. We have not reached the point where we will commit crime if there are police present. So that's what I genuinely believe after years and years of studying this issue and years of being a law enforcement issue. I'm convinced that that's what's needed. And well, I'll take it even just a step further, if I may, for just a half a second. Diane Coleman, who is the Ward F council person, in her very first campaign, she came to me and she said, Mr. Breaker, my issue is your issue. Cops on the street. I really believe that's what's necessary to prevent crime. She said, I'm going to vote for you for president of the NAACP. You vote for me for councilwoman, and after I win, we'll get together and we'll get some cops on the street. I said, fine. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet. So my point is this. The mayor says he's for it. Our Ward F council person says she's for it. As a matter of fact, Rolando Lavarro, who's the council president, who I know, he says he's for it. We all seem to have a consensus that this is what's needed. We're simply waiting for the implementation.
Is it possible that there's a manpower issue here with the police? You would know better than me whether or not we may or may not have as many police as we had one time when we had cops walking the beat. Could that be the holdup or the hassle that causes this kind of an approach to be postponed or not put into operation, into effect, because we have a manpower shortage?
And I'm going to piggyback on that. Or could it be a priority issue? Or budget?
Okay. Let me address all three of those. Wrong, wrong, wrong. In my well-considered opinion, based upon 32 years of experience as an officer, a supervisor, and an administrator, we don't need foot patrol throughout the city.
Exactly.
You understand?
Yeah.
We need it in high crime areas. I firmly believe.
Is it a priority?
Manpower is not the problem.
Is it a priority, though?
That's another issue. I don't know if it is a priority of the administration.
What have your conversations led you to believe, in your opinion?
Let me tell you, we have to take a break. So we will hear your opinion when we come back.
Thank you.
And then we're going to switch to Shantae Presley, and she's going to tell us what hopefully we can see happen with the Jersey City NAACP Youth Council. Right now, we're going to go to a break. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Earl Morgan Hour, Facebook at the Earl Morgan Hour, and call in, please. We really would like you to call in at 718-888-7444, and you're listening to Naima by John Coltrane. And we're going to take our break. We'll be back within 90 seconds. 90 seconds.
GoPro Radio, the fastest growing network in the galaxy, is leaner and meaner with a new attitude, new technology, and a brand new lineup. Tune in and get wired every Wednesday, starting at 5 p.m. Eastern with the BCS Experience featuring Byron C. Saunders, formerly of New York City's WBAI. Then at 6 p.m., it's the Black Agenda TV Express featuring sought-out political commentator Glenn Ford, formerly of America's Black Forum. Then at 8 p.m., it's time for Kay Thompson Live with the legendary radio host Kay Thompson of Inner City Broadcasting's WLIB and her son, renowned actor Eric Payne, who starred in such films as Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, Drop Squad, and many more. Then at 9 p.m., it's Food Rap featuring Nina Markel, a.k.a. the unofficial mayor of Jersey City, and former Viacom marketing guru Shauna Glover. Last but not least, at 10 p.m. Eastern, it's The Sexy Party Show with the bad boy of dating Mr. Locario of I Love New York fame and his partner in crime, Miles Cunningham. So get wired every Wednesday from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern only on the GoPro Radio Network, www.goproradio.com. Listen to the voices in your head.
You're listening to content developed by the GoPro Radio Network, the fastest growing network in the galaxy. GoPro Radio Network. Listen to the voices in your head.
All right, we're back at the Earl Morgan Hour with your host, Earl Morgan. Good evening again. We were just about to hear Mr. Breaker's opinion about the police, and there was an issue that you brought up, and I'd like to follow up really quickly. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I don't know what the priorities of the police department are. Right now, they appear to be arrests. That's what the sweeps are about, and that's the direction in which the department seems to be going. I tend to believe that the department needs to prioritize crime prevention in the African American community.
Well, you know, one of the issues I have there is this. There's this 30, 40-year push now to revitalize Martin Luther King Drive, which is a thoroughfare that cuts straight through the heart of the black community. And it's also one of the most crime-ridden areas in the city. It and its environs, the area around it. How are you going to save it if you do not make that area safe from crime? If you go to King Drive, you see no adults. You just see children. And if you want to get people to come in and buy appliances or whatever else you might want to sell, you got to have them to go. They got to go on the block. As it stands now, most adults don't want to be on King Drive. And unless we increase the police protection there, or the law enforcement there, or like you said, cops want to be someone there making sure that the laws are adhered to, how are we ever going to change it?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Morgan. I think that public safety should be job one for any administration. I bet if you talk to Barack Obama and say, what's your number one consideration, he would say the safety of the American people. I think the mayor of Jersey City and our leaders have to make the public safety of the community job one. And that needs to start with the King Drive, which runs directly through the heart of the community, and Ocean Avenue.
Ocean Avenue and Bergen Avenue.
And Bergen Avenue. Yeah. If you can make those areas safe, you'd be doing a tremendous service to all of us.
Recently, I had an experience where we went down and we met with our chief of police. And meeting with our chief of police, we, being proactive, were able to get a cop on the block that was interactive. He gets to know the community easily talks to him. Shantae, you work with children, or rather young adults. And we recently had something together to bring our young adults together. Will you talk about that, please?
Sure. At the end of February, with the Education Committee and the Political Action Committee, we hosted the Image Awards, a viewing party at the Urban League. And it was sad to say that none of the youth came out. And it's probably because they don't know, or they don't recognize what the Image Award is, or see a presence, a viable presence of the NAACP within the community, despite the fact we have an active adult branch and an active youth council. So I'm not sure what more we can do outside of trying to keep them engaged. A lot of the youth nowadays want to be entertained, but that's not the purpose of the NAACP. Especially the Youth Council, is to educate and inform them of the history, as you said.
And how are you doing that?
Well, it's hard, it's very difficult, but when you get a group of youth who stick with you, you have to show consistency. So I have a team of about 4 adults, and we have consistency with 7 youth. So what we do, instead of pushing our ideas on them, we allow them to talk to us and let us know what they want, what their friends want, and how we can get more of the teenagers engaged.
What do they want?
Yes.
Parties, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is,
So how are you directing that?
So we put a spin on it. So like last Saturday, we had a poetry session. So it was a mix between adults and youth, where we had the youth recite poems we had 4 phenomenal poets that we recognized: Langston Hughes, Maya Angelou, Nikki Giovanni, and Gwendolyn Brooks. So we had them recite their poems, so it's like bringing in the history, and had them recite their original poems as well. So you have to bridge the gap in a different way. So that's what we're trying to do, bridge that gap that's outside of the normal.
What is the age range of the Youth Council? What are you looking for in that age range?
Well, the Youth Council of the NAACP starts at age 7 and it goes up to age 18. So with the help of the adults, we can break those groups into 2 to teach the younger one the history. So when they get to the 18, we start teaching them the leadership responsibilities, how to be an active participant in their community as well as their schools, and to seek higher education.
So you have 7 at this moment, and what's the age range of those 7?
Right now, they're between the ages of 12 and 17.
Well, I was a youth council member myself in my younger years, obviously. That was a long time ago.
We could go, huh?
Yeah, it seems that was that way. And we did all kinds of things. I mean, we actually were able to integrate the swimming pool at Palisades Amusement Park, which they wouldn't let black people in. I mean, we had a different set of a different agenda. We knew what the problem was. You could see it. It wasn't subtle. You can't come in.
Right.
That's not subtle. But we did things. We had dances and stuff like that also. We also had resistance. A lot of young people didn't want to join, but we had a pretty good active youth council. And what other things do they want to do besides have a party?
Everything is based around fashion and design in the music industry now. So that's where the focus is. If it's not a party, it's a fashion show. If it's not a fashion show, it's a high school game. So we try to have our presence in those places as well. When they have the games during the football season as well as basketball season, the youth are there and they try to recruit membership. But of course, they consider that to be boring.
Yeah, well, yeah, they do seem to. There's a book a guy wrote not too many years ago called "Entertaining Ourselves to Death."
Right.
Sometimes I think he was onto something. We're about ready to go off, but
Mr. Breaker, I just want to ask, can you please give our listening audience two things? How they can contact the NAACP to join and the phenomenal programs we have coming up?
Yes. Well, our office is located at 153 Martin Luther King Drive, and we can be reached at area code 201-333-3697, and our email address is jerseycitybranchnaacp@gmail.com. We're on Facebook. Our office is open every day between 10 and 3. Coming up, we have a freeholders debate. We have a voter get out the vote drive. We're hoping to have a health fair. We have very many activities.
The ACLU.
The ACLU, the director of the New Jersey division of ACLU, is going to come in and tell the community what their rights are. We think that's incredibly important. Our political action committee, under your astute leadership, has really done some fine things, and we're looking to do more.
Okay, so we're just about counting down the seconds to the end now. I want to thank my guests, Shante Presley and William Breaker, for being here tonight to enlighten us on their ideas on how we can make our city better. And of course, I'd love to thank my lovely and talented co-host here,
and the legend,
Tinia
Earl Morgan.
Well, thank you, Tinia. And we're just about done. So until next week, we wish you GoPro Radio, the fanatics out there, a good evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.